All right, so all our navigation is set up and is working, which is a great thing. But now we've got to put some other pieces in place. Specifically, we need to be able to calculate these things. And in order to make all of our calculations work, we first have to put in place a tool that we haven't yet discussed, and that is variables. So we need to set a variable for base, for height, actually for base 1, base 2, height, side 1, side 2. So we've got 5 different variables we need to set up. And we'll use all 5 of those variables in all of the different shapes that are in our shape calculator, at least now. If you expand this, you may need to add more variables in order to account for the different kinds of shapes that you're working with. However, for what we've got right now, 5 variables is what we'll need. So in this video, we're going to set up those 5 variables, and we're actually going to set up a function that will make it so that we can set all of those variables back to 0 once somebody has used them. And that's going to be an important feature to put in place so that we don't have any issues with any kind of duplicated functions or erroneous error values or erroneous variable values in any kind of calculation. So first step is to set up our variables. And in your toolbox, you can see there's a variables tab. So if we click on that variables tab, that's the first thing that we're going to do. Now, to set up a variable, all we really need to do is bring in this variables, the first object there, which is variable x equals block. And I'm gonna put that right under our set screen, start screen. And again, we have 5 variables we're going to set up, so we're going to bring in 5 of those. 4. That's not 4. Okay. Now, again, we've really already kind of named what those variables should be. So I'm going to name this first one base 1. Second one, I'm going to name base 2. The next one will be base 3. It won't be. That's crazy. It's going to be height. Then I've got side 1. And this will be side 2. All of these variables we're going to set to 0 in the beginning so that they have that 0 value and that way they won't impact negatively any of our calculations, or if somebody hits the submit button before there's anything in there, there's not going to be weird values that come in. It's going to be 0 values that come in, which should make sense. Now, we're going to add a function. I said we're going to add a function. We're going to add a function that will return these values to 0 anytime anyone hits a back button, so that we don't accidentally have weird values entered into formulas that seem strange. So here's how we do that. We're going to get a function block, and my function, we're just going to pop that in right under our variables. And my function, we're going to name 0 out. I'm calling it 0 out because it's kind of what we want to do. We want to 0 out all of our variables once we've left any of those different calculation areas. So we'll go back to our variables, and we're going to bring that same variable block in again, and we're going to name all those same variables again, and then we should have a function that we're able to pop into a number of different places. So again, same variables. Helps if you spell them the same. That's going to be 0. It's a little dead screen time there. Mr. Emerson typing and not paying any attention to you guys. All right, so I've got all my variables again in this 0 out function, so that 0 out function basically just sets everything back to 0. Now, where do I want that 0 out function? Basically, I would say I want that 0 out function anywhere that I have a back button. So here's a back button. Here's my first back button. So I'm going to go to functions, and I'm going to bring in my function block, right? So when I hit that triangle back button, I want to 0 out. when I hit that quadrilateral back button, I want to zero out. And then on all of these other back buttons, we want to do the same thing. So the rectangle back button will zero out. The parallelogram rhombus back button will zero out. And finally, the trapezoid back button will also zero out. Spelling does count here, right? So you have to make sure that you spell your functions correctly in order to make those functions actually happen. That's pretty significant, pretty important for your code to work. So what this does for us is it gets our variables set up, and once we have our variables set up, we should be able to use our variables to make calculations. And the next 3 videos that you look at will be each of these screens setting up our collecting our variable data and then using that variable data to make calculations. So we're in pretty good shape here.